The dust rose behind them like smoke signals announcing death. 3 riders came at sundown, silhouettes against the fading light, their horses moving with the slow certainty of men who knew their business. Martha Crane stood alone on her porch, one hand resting on the weathered rail, her body still as the cottonwood that grew beside the house. She'd watched them coming for the last mile, tracking their approach across the open grassland that stretched from her fence line to the horizon. Before we dive in, tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? The wind pushed through the dry grass, carrying the smell of sage and coming night. Leather creaked. Spurs jingled. The horses stopped 50 feet out, and the 3 men dismounted with the practiced economy of riders who'd done this before. The lead man wore a deputy's badge pinned crooked on his vest, the metal catching the last of the golden light. He was younger than the other 2, maybe 30, with the kind of lean build that came from living hard and traveling light. His companions spread wide without being told, positioning themselves 45 degrees apart in a formation Martha recognized instantly. Crossfire. Classic intimidation. She didn't move, didn't speak, just watched with the stillness of someone who'd already made her decision and was waiting for them to make theirs. The deputy took his time walking forward, his right hand drifting down to loosen the holster at his hip. The movement was casual, practiced, meant to be noticed. 20 feet away now, close enough to see Martha's face in the dying light, the lines at her eyes, the gray threading through dark hair pulled back in a simple bun. Close enough to see she was alone. Close enough to mistake her silence for fear. "Mrs. Crane," he said, his voice carrying the flat authority of men who hide behind badges. "Name's Cole Hendricks. I'm here on behalf of the county regarding unpaid tax obligations on this property." Martha said nothing. Behind Hendricks, one of his men spat a stream of tobacco juice and grinned. The other kept his hand near his gun, eyes scanning the windows of the house. "You got until sunrise tomorrow to vacate," Hendricks continued. "Legal papers have been filed. Your time's up." Still she didn't speak. Her hand remained on the porch rail, 6 inches from a cloth-wrapped bundle she'd placed there an hour before they arrived. The wind tugged at the edges of the fabric. Hendricks took another step. His hand hovered near his pistol grip, fingers flexing. Some men mistake patience for weakness. Those men don't live long enough to learn the difference. "You understand what I'm telling you?" Hendricks' voice had taken on an edge. "Come sunrise, you ain't here, or you are here and we have to move you. Either way, this land ain't yours no more." The silence stretched. Hendricks' jaw tightened. The man on the left shifted his weight, nervous energy making him dangerous. "Your husband ain't here to protect you no more, old woman," Hendricks said. The words hung in the air like gun smoke. Martha's eyes, hazel, steady, unblinking, met his. The question hung between them in the purple light of dusk. Would she back down, or would she make him regret crossing that line? But to understand what happened next, you need to know where this started. Montana Territory, 1884. The town of Stillwater Bend sat in a valley where 3 creeks converged, creating a ribbon of green in an otherwise harsh landscape. Martha Crane had lived on her ranch for 32 years, arriving as a bride of 23 when the land was still being contested by Crow hunting parties and claim jumpers who figured a piece of paper from Washington meant nothing compared to a faster gun. The Crane Ranch wasn't much to look at. 240 acres of grazing land, a modest house, a barn that leaned slightly north from decades of wind. But a clear creek ran through the heart of the property, and water meant everything. Martha and Jacob had built the place with their own hands, prying stones from the creek bed to build the foundation, cutting timber from the mountains, surviving winters that killed cattle and summers that dried the grassland to tinder. Jacob Crane had died 8 months earlier. Pneumonia, the doctor said, though Martha knew it was the accumulated weight of 3 decades working this land. He was buried on a hillside overlooking the creek, under a simple stone marker she'd carved herself. No fancy words, just his name and the years. That was how Jacob would have wanted it. The townspeople knew Martha as a woman who kept to herself. Once a month she rode into Stillwater Bend for supplies, flour, sugar, ammunition, salt. She paid cash, spoke little, and returned to her ranch the same day. She was capable in the way frontier women had to be, able to birth a calf, or put down a lame horse, or patch a roof before the winter snows came. But there were whispers. Old Pete, who ran the livery, remembered that Martha could ride before she married Jacob, that she could shoot too, hitting targets most men missed. She'd come from somewhere back east, Kansas, maybe, or Missouri, with no family she'd discuss and a past she'd buried as deliberately as she'd buried her maiden name. Jacob had once told the bartender, after his third whiskey, that Martha had a life before this one, and it wasn't soft. But Jacob was a man who kept confidences, and he never said more than that. The land syndicate had arrived the previous spring, backed by railroad money and Eastern investors who saw the future running on steel rails and telegraph wires. They wanted the Creek Valley, wanted to control the water that would make their enterprise profitable. They bought out 3 ranches already, using debt collection and legal manipulation, buying judges and clerks, twisting the law into whatever shape served their purpose. Martha's ranch was the last holdout. She owned her land free and clear, had the papers to prove it, and made no secret she had no intention of selling. So the syndicate sent Cole Hendricks, a hired gun wearing a bought badge, to finish the job. Hendricks had killed 2 men in shootings he called lawful, both while serving eviction notices. He wasn't stupid. He was dangerous, professional, and backed by men who believed money could solve any problem, including stubborn widows. But did Hendricks know who he was really facing? 2 weeks before that sunset confrontation, the pressure campaign began in earnest. A surveyor crew arrived without permission, planting stakes across Martha's grazing pasture, running chains, and taking measurements as if the land already belonged to someone else. When Martha rode out to confront them, the crew boss, a bulky man named Taggart with hands like ham hocks, handed her an eviction notice. The paper claimed she owed back taxes in an amount that would have bankrupted her twice over. The signature was forged, the debt fabricated, but when Martha rode to town and challenged it at the land office, the clerk looked at her with the dead eyes of a man who'd already sold his conscience. The debt was legal, he said, due in